All right, Mr. Daniels, you there? Or sorry, Dr. Daniels, you there?
I'm here.
Awesome, awesome. Okay. Well, welcome to Empower Now. It's your host, Reggie White. I'm very excited for today's episode because we have one of the great ones on the line here, Dr. Joy Daniels. So today we're going to be talking about this concept of the road to greatness. This is season 1, episode 9. And I'm really excited for the time that me and Joy will have together. Before I go any further, I'm going to start us off with a prayer, and then we're going to tap and dive right in. So if you're driving, please get to your destination safely. Don't worry about bowing with and close your eyes while you're driving once you get to your destination safe. But for those that can bow with me as we go to the throne and pray to our Almighty Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Lord, I thank you for this time that I have with my good college friend, Dr. Joy Daniels. Father, I pray that you can be able to help us to edify, empower, and encourage somebody from this conversation that me and Joey have on this podcast. I pray that you can be in the midst, and if there's anything in that as you have prayed, that you can remove it, and that you can be able to help speak through us, be vessels, like use us as vessels for this situation tonight. Use us as guides for somebody that may be trying to figure out how to navigate through life. And let this be something that can truly, truly impact somebody in their life in any shape and form, from pursuing that dream or going after that call that you have in their life, whatever it looks like, Lord. I pray that we can be able to show them what it truly means to seek that road to greatness in your way, Lord, in your will. So for that, thank you for the time that we have. And I just pray that this can be, again, impactful and something that can empower somebody right here, right now. All right. So listeners, I'm going to give Joey Daniels some time to introduce himself, the one and only Dr. Joey Daniels. So with that, Joey, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can tell the listeners who you are, your story, and then how me and you met.
Yeah, that's what's up, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for the platform. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you. I am Joseph W. Daniels III. Many people, I guess, pre-21 knows me as Joey. Post-21 knows me as Joe. And I've just been blessed, man. I currently reside in Northwest Arkansas with my lovely wife, Tiffany, and my 2 daughters, Embry and Jaden. And I am a real estate investor, entrepreneur, work for a large retailer as my day job. And yeah, man, just in a space and atmosphere to continue to move, continue to build, grow, and inspire and serve community.
Fantastic, Joey. Fantastic. So you said a lot there about the things you're involved in. I actually want to go in a different direction because you brought up all the awesome things you're doing. Let's start with the listeners. How can they go out and make different things happen if they want to be an entrepreneur, they want to balance a family? Like, what advice would you give to somebody before we go any further?
I would just say start where you are. Like, I don't think anyone needs to overcomplicate anything. I mean, everybody had to start somewhere. I mean, you just kind of make it similar to a gym experience, right? Like, you just can't go on there and slap a bunch of 45-pound plates on the bench and expect to start to push out a whole bunch of bench presses. It's just important to start where you are and to not get so consumed with what everybody else is doing around you, and just make sure you kind of keep an eye out on what you like, what you're passionate about, and take a chance and take the leap, and just know that there's a lot of people around you who will support you as long as you let them know what your interests and motivations are.
Yeah, 100%. Again, going back to the topic about greatness and the road to greatness, I want to read a few scriptures first, and then I'm going to ask Joey some questions, and we'll dive in a little deeper. But you just heard kind of what Joey was saying a moment ago, just about how don't overcomplicate things or don't rush into things. Like, you got to build up that that character, or build up that mindset, or build up that discipline. We're going to talk a little bit about responsibility later tonight too, but I think that was real powerful what he said. But I'm going to be reading Mark 10 verses 42 to 45, and I'm coming from the New King James Version. And it says, "But Jesus called to them to himself and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant. And whoever of you desires to be first shall be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." So I'm gonna let that resonate just a little bit, because that may be confusing somebody. You probably weren't expecting to hear when we talk about what it means to be great, talk about service. because what we got to be doing as true believers and walking in this walk with Christ, it requires us to serve. It requires us to sacrifice. So, Joey, the first question I have for you tonight is, in your perspective, what does it mean to truly serve?
To truly serve, I think it's hard. I think we all have self-ambition, selfishness, the desire to be better than the next person, competition. I think all those things are true and at least in our society. So I think to serve in a way that allows other people to follow you. I think to do that is just to be proximate with people and proximate with community. And like community doesn't have to be complicated either, right? Like you look at your job, your faith-based environment, your family, and you just figure out where there are things that I can do with the gifts that I've been given, that I can focus on the needs of those around me. And how do I put those things in my everyday experience so that it doesn't become something where it's volunteer hours, right? But it's just a natural way of I show up to work, or I show up to do something with a heart that says, I can't walk away unless something gets done. And oftentimes serving is not these large, huge, broadcasted type of things. It's small gestures, right? I mean, serving, it is open the door for somebody, right? Like serving can be, you see someone and you make it a point to say hello, right? It doesn't always have to be this, Herculean Spider-Man-esque type of thing, right? It's just each and every day, how do I show up? And will I try to make others better around me, even if it means that I have to do a little bit more work?
Yeah, wow. I'm just again letting that resonate for a little bit because it's powerful. And I think when we think about service, I really do think what comes to mind for me is how do we find ways to move ourselves out the equation? How is it something that we're doing out of a genuine nature that's not to, self-serve or to uplift us? Like how are we bringing somebody along the ride? And sometimes service can be mentorship. Sometimes service can be, like you said, finding ways just to do a little kind thing to go out your way not because you're expecting something back. So I would say for the listeners, find ways to go above and beyond. Sometimes we're very guilty of checkbox, like checking the box or getting a to-do list or a task and saying, oh, I've done that, I've done my part. But sometimes true service is going above and beyond, even when somebody didn't ask you to, because of who you're representing. And again, that goes back to what Christ is trying to say, because in Mark 10, when we were reading that verse in verse 42 through 45, it was talking about like, for those that desire to be great, they got to be willing to serve. And for those that are designed to be first, that's not going to yield the benefit you think. So I think what Joey's saying is important here too. So Joey, kind of building onto that, when we talk about service, talk to me about what it means to be a servant leader, or what servant leadership looks like.
I just think about those who I look up to. Like, I'm at work a lot, and so, but I find ways to get into like different mentor circles, and so I look at those who have very demanding jobs, very demanding work life experiences that they're responsible for, right? And I think about those leaders who are figuring out, how do I maintain everything I have going on, but I still find time to check in and take care of those who are around me. And I find that oftentimes those who show up and care, in times that are not scripted, in times that are not something that is sought after, like you're saying, for the award or for the check the box. Those folks really have strong followings, right? Like, you have people who just say, look, I could do way more stuff with my time. I could gain more, I can earn more, I can vacation more, but it's like, for what? Like, enjoying the fulfillment of knowing that somebody else was able to do something because I helped them do it, right? That's powerful. That's impactful. Or the idea that I spent a lot of time, energy, and effort, and collaborated with folks around me to put something in place so that others who come behind have the ability to kind of walk into that space and not have to endure certain challenges, right? Like having the desire to do those types of things, regardless of if there's an award, if there's a promotion, those are things that are important. But I think that's what life is worth living for, right? I think life is worth living for that. Like I just think about, like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Troy, that talks about the Trojan War, but
Mm-hmm.
I always just think about what Achilles' mom said, right, at the very beginning of the movie. She's like, many wars will be fought after this, many kings will come after this, but this is the war, right? Like, this is the war you need to be involved in, and make sure everybody remembers your name, and like your name will live on through time, right? So if you ever think about just does it matter if somebody saw this, did I get an award? It's just like, the fact that somebody may not check in on you, you serve in certain capacities one way or the other. Like, folks are going to remember you, and those folks will take care of you. And so over time, it's just like, you can do all the things you want to grow, as a business owner, to grow in your job, to do whatever. But, it's really about, how you make people feel and how you serve other folks. That's to me, that's the testament of just life in general. Like why live if we're not gonna to do what's right for people, especially those who are around us in our community.
Yeah. Spot on, man. Spot on. And for the listeners, just to give some context, Dr. Joey Daniels, was somebody that I went to school with back in North Carolina A&T. And I would never forget when I first joined, and he was involved in an organization called the National Society of Black Engineers, and kind of took me in and helped me kind of go on a better path, because I definitely was not as focused as I am now when I first joined that school. But as I kind of went through a journey with Joey and spending time with Joey, I'll never forget his senior year when I was in his apartment, and he had pulled me to the side. He had made breakfast for me, and he pulled me to the side and was just like, man, just do the same thing, not the breakfast per se, but the mentorship, the instilling of the value, like he was talking about being remembered. He was saying, do the same thing for just at least one other person. And that resonated with me, man. I remember being like, 19, 20 at the time. And that resonated with me since that moment. And I definitely have taken that, from that experience to so many different conversations and individuals I've come across in my life. But I bring that up because like Joey was saying, like, this life is not about the accolades. Life is not about the rewards. It's about the impact you have. And when we talk about the road to being, great, and what it means to truly live a life that's worth living, like, that's what it's all about. It's all about the one. Who's your one? Who's the person you need to be focused on? Who's the person you need to encourage? Because the reality is, like, Dr. Joey Daniels doesn't become Dr. Joey Daniels if there weren't certain peoples along that journey to bring him up, to lift him up, to encourage him. Reggie White doesn't become Reggie White. And Joey may not know this, but Reggie White doesn't become Reggie White if he doesn't come across Joey Daniels' path. He doesn't come across different other people. My father is in my life, like different things that has been key moments in times. So like when we talk about, like, for example, stories or perspective, and if you're a type of person that plays games, like there's certain moments in time or certain chapters or certain events or certain levels that you have to cross and go through in order to get to the other side. And I think that's something that I really want to take time to talk about, because to seek greatness, you have to be willing to go through something. And then when you get on the other side, you got to be able to remember who along the way either brought you through that, or how do you do the same for somebody else and put that hand out to bring somebody up.
That's right.
Yeah. So let me read one more scripture. I got a few more that I'll read, but as things come up, and I love where this is heading, I think it's really powerful. The next scripture I'm going to read is Luke 9:48. I'm coming from the New King James Version. And it says, and said to them, whoever receives this little child in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For he who is least among you will be great. And I want to kind of add upon that. It's not in this scripture, but when we think about faith, and like how the Lord says that if you're going to follow me, you got to have childlike faith. And even the first thing that I was mentioning, how whoever receives this little child in my name receives me. your whole perspective of greatness, the way you probably were raised, is you look at people that are famous, or you look at people that's got this following, and you don't know what it took for some of those individuals to get there. But it's about the least of you among you will be great. So how many times in life have we came from, like, in certain situations, we came from nothing, or we didn't have any money, or you finally got that job, and then you remember, if you ever reflect and say, this is what I went through, like the appreciation when you didn't have things handed to you is a whole nother dynamic than if something's handed to you, or if everything's easy and you don't have to work for it. So like, to truly be great, you got to be the least among. And the ones that impact are the ones that came from the bottom. Not to say that you have to come from the bottom, but I'm saying, like, if you're going to own a business, if you want people to really get perspective, start them from ground zero, so they understand what it means to serve, what it means to work for something, what it means to go after that thing. Because if it's given to you, or you don't understand what it means to be a servant, or what it means to be lesser than and not the focus, and everybody serving you, you're not going to have the appreciation. So let me ask this to you, Joey. The next thing I want to talk about, and you mentioned it as you introduced yourself, I want you to tell everybody a little bit about what it means to build communities through love, and also talk a little bit about what you're doing with some of that, I don't know, personally.
Sure. Yeah, I want to touch on the scripture you just read and just kind of think about, and I'll parlay that into to your question. I think that when we're saying the least of these, I think we're really just looking at, like, how complicated it is to be able to free yourself of the desire to accumulate, right? I think just in general, right? Like it's so complicated to be able to be ambitious and want to go get, right? Like we want to be in a space where we're, becoming millionaires, and we're becoming, and we're owners of stuff, and we have a bank account that's bringing in passive income, and I get to go and live on the beach and I get to do all this kind of stuff, right? And so, the society we're in a capitalistic society, we want to go do that. So then to follow Christ and say, okay, we're only the least of these, right? That's because there's so many things blocking what Christ is actually saying, what the word is actually saying in terms of how we're supposed to follow Christ, right? There's so many things that are just in the way, from politics to economics to classism to racism to to sexism to LGBTQ plus, and there's just so many things that's already in our way, that it's so hard to really be able to die to self every day and continue to live through, to live for and by the teachings and try to mimic, Christ. And so I think just because of that, there's not going to be many of us who are able to do it successfully. But I think every day when we wake up, now as I get to your question, how do we wake up every day, doing our daily affirmations, making sure we're good. But how do we get up thinking, like, how do I build my community today? Like, how do I get there? Back in like, you'll remember this, back in 2015, I believe it was, that's when Mother Emanuel Church down in South Carolina, in Charleston, South Carolina, was shot up by the white supremacists who came to Bible study. I live in Arkansas. And so when that happened, the following year, I want to say Nikki Haley, who was the governor at that time, she took down the Confederate flag at the State House that had been flying, since forever. And so when she did that, that sent out, pretty massive issues across the South, right? And so that happened also in Arkansas. And so we have a biker rally that's held once a year in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I went to the University of Arkansas for my doctorate degree and got very, very close and tied into the community. Long story longer, I ended up protesting the following biker rally, because in that biker rally I'm talking about now, there was Confederate flags everywhere. And so to live in a city that confesses and discusses how it wants to be inclusive, it pretty much got to a point where, we were only going to be inclusive for 358 days out of the year. And we were going to allow all the different things, right? Like racism, all this stuff to come down. So then, I say that, well, we're not going to have that. If you gotta bring, that stuff to our community, then that shouldn't be in our community. And so I ended up building stuff around that, trying to fight, to get certain things right along those lines. And then a hashtag just came out of nowhere: build community through love, right? And so did a lot of stuff with kind of my own self learning of Dr. King, and a lot of work that happened over the civil rights movement. So he talks a lot about agape love, which is love for your brother. And so I pretty much was just like, hey, like we got to build community, with this concept of agape love. And so ever since then, it's just been kind of a mantra I live by, where, each and every day we figure out how we're going to build community, whether that's through community development, economic development. And then I'm in real estate as well. So looking at it from the standpoint of real estate development too.
Yeah, thank you, Joy, for giving that perspective, man. So, for the listeners, I want to just kind of dissect that, not necessarily what Joey said per se, but just to give you some perspective. You see, a lot of times, like when we think about our family's generation, like what Joey was saying about Dr. King and everything that was going on with the civil rights movement, like our generation before us, for the most part, was going through that environment. But as we were growing up, for folks that were born in like the 90s, or even if you were born in like the early 2000s, a lot of this generation was trying to seek like who is going to be the next, like Dr. King, who is going to be the next, community impact leader. And the advice I would give you all is don't wait for the next person. Why not you? Why can't that not be you? Like this series we've been talking through these last couple of episodes, it's been the Why Not Me series. And for somebody that's listening, I hope I can encourage you to say that you don't have to wait for the next big thing or that person. Like, just like Joey was saying, it started with him taking a step forward or taking the initiative to try, and then it grew bigger. So sometimes we're waiting for like the quantitative, or having so many people, get these likes or get this following. And that's not what it's about. It's, if there is something that you see a need, go feel that need, take that initiative to go after it. And then the next thing you know, you never know what could come out of that. So sometimes, man, we got to move ourselves out the way and get out of our own head of, oh, I'm not smart enough, or oh, I'm not talented enough, or oh, I can't speak. Like, nah, move that all out the way. Like, there are people, that's where community comes in. Like what Joey's talking about, what I think is so powerful is when we think about this whole concept of it takes a village to raise a child, right? I want you to think about who is your community. How do you build that up? How do you uplift people? And then who's around you for you to be able to impact? And the next thing you know, you can expand that community. You can expand your territory, right? Like larger territory. Like that's what it's about. It's not about seeking fame. It's not about saying, I want to wait for the next person to go do this great thing. No, sometimes it requires us to have that humility, or to have that belief that, you know what, I'm going to go take this step and not wait for somebody else to take that step for me. Before I go any further, Joe, I want to see if there's anything else you want to chime in on, just for the listeners, before I ask a few more questions.
Sure. And it's just timing, right? Like I think social media and viral moments just make us feel like we have to constantly be delivering results every day. Everything has to be something that you can put out there. But I think, it's timing, right? I mean, there's a time for there's a time for sowing seed, and there's a waiting period there. There's a time for watering, and there's a time for harvest. But harvest doesn't always look the same for everybody, right? Like some people's soil ain't that good yet. So sometimes you got to spend some time, cultivating your soil, so that when you do sow a seed, and it does get watered, what you're harvesting is the best of the crop, right? But then once that crop is gone, you still have to go through tilling the land, sowing the seed, and watering again, right? So understand that there's time for service in a way that's really going to show lasting results. But there's glory in just consistency. Right? So maybe it's not your season right now, but how are you also serving others to make sure that when they're in their season, you're bringing them up? Or when folks who can't be in their season because they're waiting on you to serve in a way that allows them to have a platform to go forward. It's all about timing. And I think, like we should honor and respect that, and not feel like, we have to be the one that's constantly on and constantly delivering, right? Like I have a 2.5-year-old and a 3-week-old. My service is to them at this point. So my community will take some I'll take some time away from serving the larger community to make sure my home community is at a point where it's sufficient, right? I think it's just timing, and I think we should respect the timing of where we are, and it's a journey too, right? So I mean, you talked about being an auntie. I mean, we got plenty of memories and stories we can holler at, right? Right? So um, but it's the moments, it's those small moments where you take small pieces and you continue to build off those things. So if right now you feel, for your listeners, if right now you feel restless because you feel like it should be your time but you don't think it is, like, just kind of take a step back and reevaluate, like, are you in the season that you should be in, right? But sometimes being in the wilderness is not a bad thing. Sometimes being in the wilderness allows you to really take stock of who are you and what do you need to be, so that when you get to the point where you get to stay in Canaan, you fire on all cylinders and you're ready for that. Because if you're a wilderness wanderer in Canaan, it's not good for you. So spend some time, learn who you are, and just embrace where you are in the moment.
Yeah, man. Wow, I love where this is heading. I love how Joey even talked about harvest. He talked through the whole process, right? And all of that, when we think about harvest, we think about a garden, or we think about farming. For those that may be farming or familiar with farming, it's a level of work required to go out there and till. So it's a level of work that's required to make things happen and to get, that harvest. And what I want to kind of talk about a little bit more here, Joey mentioned Spider-Man earlier, and that's crazy to me. That's one of my favorite superheroes. But something that Uncle Ben told Spider-Man was, with great power comes great responsibility. And what I want to talk about is responsibility. I was listening to something right before this podcast that was so powerful and so relevant. And I just want to kind of give some perspective again for the listeners. It was talking about how responsibility isn't a curse. It isn't a burden. It's a gift. So when you think about that calling, or answering that call, or going after that moment, or getting to your season, there's going to be a level of responsibility that comes with it. For both me and Joy, we can both relate that we are husbands, we are fathers, and we're also workers. So there's a level of responsibility that comes in so many facets in every last one of those. There's a level of service that requires for our wives. There's a level of service that requires for our children. There's a level of service that requires when we're at the workplace to be able to provide. And for the listeners that's out there that may be on the come up, or maybe pursuing that degree, or maybe just starting out at work, I want you to know that responsibility is a gift, but you got to be ready for that gift. So like what Joey was saying about the season and going through the wilderness, if you're not working for it, if you're not going after it, you will not be ready for when that time comes, and you won't be able to realize the full potential if you're not putting the work behind it. You should be looking at these times in your life as preparation for the next great thing. So like, for example, just putting in simple state, if you're like somebody that's working in corporate America, somebody say, hey, we want you to do this project, or hey, we want you to do this presentation. If you don't put the work behind and prepare and get ready and, practice and work through that, when that moment and that time comes, you won't get noticed. You won't be ready. So the other thing I just want to say is, like, responsibility, service, integrity, understanding the why. Like, those are the type of things we talk about what it means to be great. Like, yes, you have to be least stand, but you have to have perspective. You got to be willing to take on, not necessarily more all the time, but you got to be willing to appreciate what you have and where you are. Just like you heard Joey said, he can't build his community through love if he's not taking care of home. If his wife isn't good, if his daughters aren't good, he's not good. And then how can he go out there and say, I'm serving the community of love, if he isn't serving his family first? And you see, a lot of the times we got to get our priorities in order. The world is going to tell you so much that it's about you and yours and just you. And that's not what it's about. It's Christ. It's your family that needs to be taken care of, and it's your responsibilities. But again, the foundation for all of that is responsibility. And like, the other thing that I'm really learning that's been convicting me is this responsibility to walk. It's the responsibility to seek this relationship with Christ, to give him time. Can't just keep giving him leftovers. He can't help you get to that, walk through that treacherous path, that challenge, if you're not finding ways to make sure he's getting time in your life. If you're not seeking him, if you're not in his word, if you're not trusting him, like, there's no way you can get through this life. Like, yes, it is going to be hard, but it can be a lot easier if you're having him show you the way.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at the parable of the talents, right? Like, for one he gave 10, for another he gave 5, another he gave 3, another he gave 1, right? And and it's interesting, right? So like we always shine light on like, well, the one who got the one, he buried it, and then when Christ came, well, when the farmer came back, it was just like, man, the least you could have did was put it in the bank and got me some interest on my money, right? So he's like, well, I'm gonna take yours away from you. It tends to just be that, right? But like, if we're for the conversation we're having, right? Like, oftentimes I'm like, well, dang, like, why Reggie get 10 and I only got 3?
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? We get so consumed with that. And like, I remember we talked about that in study a couple summers ago, and I used it, but then like as I was on my own study, I was just like, I compared it to my real estate investing journey, right? Because I had went through and was just like, why are we not getting more rental properties? Like, there's something wrong. We gotta do something different. And then I just began thinking to myself, like, I don't even know if I was even personally, mentally, emotionally ready for more units, right? So maybe it wasn't even something that I was doing wrong. Maybe it was a season where it was just like, I can only handle 3. And if following that parable, if I had 10, I wouldn't have been able to take that 10 and go get 10 more. I would have probably taken that 10 and gotten 2, right? Or I would have lost some along the journey, right? So sometimes you're where you are because, you're where you are. Build where you are, man. Like I said at the very beginning, like, don't think that you're supposed to be somewhere if you haven't done your own inventory on, like, am I actually ready for the next level?
Yeah.
So
that's good, Joey. That's really good, man. And I love where you headed about the parable of the talents. And the next question I literally have is pretty powerful, I think, related to what you're talking about, especially when you talked about the levels to this, right? Like you were saying, like a younger you may not have been ready to do what you're doing now. And I resonate with that too, because the 15-year-old me or the 21-year-old me is completely different now, to the me now in 2023. So let me ask you this, Joey. This is probably more so for our younger listeners, but I still think it's relevant, and I'll answer the question too. But if you could talk to a younger version of yourself, what would you say? About not necessarily your life, but when they're like you were, paving a way, like let's say freshman year in college, what would you say to your younger version of yourself if you could give advice or you can give context and perspective that you have now that you didn't have then?
I would say focus on people and relationships. I would say school is easy because it's a system, right? And so yes, college is hard, classes are hard. I get that, but when it's all said and done, like, have you cultivated the relationships, even if they're people that aren't your best friends? Have you cultivated relationships enough to where, like I'm coming up on 10 years. It's been 10 years since I've graduated from A&T, right? So, I don't talk to 90% of 97% of the people, right? Like Facebook, Instagram, like that has kept us, informed on what everybody's still doing, right? But in terms of relationships, like we haven't really gotten there yet, right? So like those relationships haven't really, stood the test of time. And so I would just say, man, if you're going into college, even if you're in high school right now, like really, really value the people around you, value, what they do. Like if you feel like you got to a point where you can't be friends with somebody because of competition, then maybe you need to recheck, yourself, right? Like there's certain things that Reggie does that I can't do, right? And I should value that. And so if I knew that at a younger age and I didn't think everything was a daggone competition, and I could really begin tapping into other people's gifts and ways to help them get to where they can get to, and using that as a way to kind of build that relationship, grow that relationship, and build trust in people and have them build trust in me. I think that's the biggest thing. Like 4.0s are great, but it's just another data. It's just a stat, right? But it's the relationships that, like long after you've graduated and you got the same piece of paper that somebody else got on their wall, regardless of GPA. It's those relationships that, hey man, I'm doing this podcast and I really want you to be on it. Can you be on it? Yeah, say less. I got you. Right. It's those things, even after having spoken, haven't actually had conversation or spoken in several months, that just like, yeah, whatever you need, man, I'm here for you. So that's what I would say. Just focus on the people around you. You can't be friends with everybody, but if for those who you truly have a genuine connection and you guys live on the same frequency, I would say focus on those on building that relationship.
Yeah, man. Thank you. I couldn't agree more with you, bro. And I think we all are guilty of that. Like, I think everybody goes through that challenge. You go from high school, those high school relationships fall off. You go through college, those college relationships fall off. So I think you're right. Like, not taking that for granted is something I think is really powerful, especially when you get, like, for those that get married, it gets even tougher when you have a family and different things going on. So that's really powerful from Joey. For me, if I could talk to my younger self, or I could talk to somebody that's like, in high school or in college, the thing that I would say to the listeners is this: don't rush to the destination. I got a good friend that always kidded around with me that said, man, Reggie, you were so rushing to be an adult. Like, I was saying, I can't wait till I get to college. And then when I got to college, I was saying, I can't wait till I go off on my own and make all this money, when I was going through my freshman and sophomore year. I would say, don't rush. But I would say, don't rush to the destination. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. And the reason why I say that is because if you're not careful, you rush, and then what you don't realize is that you get older, time, it's not getting faster per se, but it feels like it goes faster. So like, you're 17, you blink, you're 21, you blink, and next thing you know, you're scratching, you're knocking on 30, and you don't want to live a life like that. You want to live a life that is worthwhile, and you seize the moment. Like, how do we appreciate where we are today? A lot of the listeners, and even for those that may tap in or find this randomly, like, some of us are where we prayed for right now in this moment, and then we don't appreciate the moment that we've been praying for, and then we get out of that moment, and then we're still seeking the next thing rather than appreciating where we are right now in the moment. Live in the moment. And I'm not saying you don't go out there and plan. I'm not saying don't go out there and write the vision down, make it plan. I'm saying learn how to live in the moment is the advice I would give, because like, you're only going to be as young as you ever will be each day. So like, each day you're getting older, God willing. And I think the thing that I really had to learn as I got older is how do I appreciate the moment right here, right now. And that's something that I really wish somebody would have gave me that perspective, because I was definitely living carefree and doing my own thing and not trying to listen to anybody. And it took people like Joey and others to kind of reel me in and help me understand like, not just how you lived in the moment, but also who you could become. Because I definitely didn't have perspective of, I can speak. I'll never forget, I used to hate presentations and talking to people, and now that's all I do. And now, don't get me wrong, it's exhausting some days. But sometimes, man, when you find people around, like Joey was saying, these relationships, you find ways to seize the moment. Like, you can be present in the moment. Sometimes you can go through the motions and not be present. And that is something I'm still working through. How do I be present in the moment and appreciate, right here, right now, rather than being so focused on what the next thing is or where I'm trying to go?
That's strong, man. I'm exactly where I prayed. I'm exactly where I am. And I prayed, what am I trying to say, man? I'm trying to get the words right. Where I am today, I prayed for several years ago. And you're right. Like, it's very hard. I mean, full picture, right? Like, this the full kind of loop, a full loop, right? Like, you get to a point where you pray to get where you want to go, and you're never satisfied. But the satisfaction isn't because you're not getting where you think you should go. And so it's just like, one step at a time. So I like, when you said that, I'm like, yeah, ouch, that's me.
Hey, man, look, bro, I'm speaking right now. We're having a candid conversation. And just for the listeners too, sometimes, man, God knows what we need right in that moment. And, a lot of the times in life, how Christ works is he confirms things, and there's sometimes he sends people to give a encouraging word, or he gives time where somebody's going to like speak into your life or prophesy in your life. But the reality is, a lot of the times we already know what we know, or we know what we're struggling with, and he confirms things. So I'm glad, Joey, that was that moment for you, bro, because I'm guilty of that too. Like, there's definitely times where I got to be more present with my wife. I got to be more present with my son. I got to, not take for granted where I am. And the other thing I will say for the listeners is sometimes, when you're going through this path and you're trying to seek greatness, or you're trying to make things happen, sometimes life will bring trouble, and that trouble can bring trauma. And Joey knows, because I had a conversation with Joey not too long ago, like I want to say 2021 or 2022. I don't remember what year it was, but I was really going through. And Joey was just trying to uplift me and encourage me. And we were talking a few times, but sometimes, man, you can't let that trauma keep you stuck. You can get help. You can get out of that moment. And I'm a testament to that. Like, I was down in the dumps, man, transparently, from 2020 through 2021 until I changed jobs in November of 2021. And it took a lot of counseling, a lot of perspective, a lot of people in my circle that were in different moments of time. My mother, big time, if you're listening to this, Mom, big kudos to you, because I don't know where I would have been without you. But sometimes we get so stuck, or we get so caught up in the now, or caught up in what's not going well. But I'm here to tell you that when you change that perspective and wake up each day, you wake up and look at it as a gift, find ways to get that counsel, find people that you can have as that inner three circle, and you start pulling yourself out of that hole. Like, if you think about it, like in this term, like for say you're going in the depths and it's dark, but there's a light that you can see. What are you doing each day to take steps to get further and further out of that hole? And then when you get out, or your hands reaching, who's right there in your life to help pull you out? That way you don't fall back in. And I think that's where a relationship with Christ comes into play. But it's also who's the right counsel around you, because a lot of times too, man, what I will also tell you is you got to be real careful who's around your circle, because everybody that says that's for you ain't for you. And I think that's where discernment comes into play. So Joey, I want us to give some final thoughts, and then I will wrap here, man. So I want you to give some final thoughts, and I'll read one more scripture after we both give final thoughts, and then we're going to wrap our episode here, man.
Sure, man. I would just say for me, like, as a just a generic final thought, like, we're in a beautiful season right now, right? So we talked about serving, we've talked about just kind of valuing time, we talked about living in the moment, and we're in a very beautiful season right now for those listening here, of course, living in the United States. We've always treated like the history as this long ago thing that we've come through, right? And it's like we've made it to this utopian environment, and so we always look back at the characters that we read about, the different names that we have glorified through schools and streets and different cities and stuff, but we never think that, like, I actually have the power to stand up and make change. And so I guess my last thing is just, we both come from stock where 4 freshmen just decided one day they were just gonna, well, not one day, but they decided, like, on that one day, February 1st, they were just gonna go and say, look, I'm tired of having to deal with this, right? Like, they weren't stoking a viral moment. They were just like, I'm just tired of this being my existence. If I gotta live in a country where I gotta go to the back of a building to get food, where I gotta pass over rats and garbage just to go get something to eat, that's not the life I want to live. That's not the place I want to live. So we're gonna figure this out and do it one way or the other, right? And I think we all have the power to go do that. So I think there's enough right now. There's an a la carte of stuff we can go do, right? It doesn't have to be everything. So take whatever gift you have and go do it. If you have a gift for speaking, go speak. If you have a gift for serving, go serve. If you have a gift for creating, go create. So find out what your gift is, use it, and find ways to allow that gift to really serve people, and serve everybody. Not serving in ways where you disenfranchise a group of people just because you don't believe with them. If you're serving, serve everybody, and you'll be that much richer for the seeds you sow in other people's lives.
Man, powerful, bro. Before I give my final thoughts, I want to read one last scripture because I think it's really spot on what we've been talking about over these last plus 40 minutes here. But it's Matthew 20:28, coming from the New King James Version. It says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So again, Christ came to serve, not to be served. Christ came to send his only begotten Son to die for all. And the thing that I would say to leave the listeners with is this: take your mindset away from what the world tells you of what it means to be great. If you want to make a true impact in this world, find a way to serve. If you want to make a true impact in this world, get comfortable with giving rather than always receiving. How do you find ways to say, you know what, Lord, it's not about me or what I want, let your will be done. Like, truly live it. Not just saying, like, truly live your life of a life of saying, you know what, Lord, I'm going to move myself out the way little by little, more and more each day, so I can get more familiar and comfortable with what you tell me to go do. And then how do you get little moments or times to find ways to impact? And again, I know we talked about mentorship real brief earlier, but I'll mention it again. How do you find ways for you to say, you know what, I'm going to reach one, teach one. I'm going to instill value. I'm going to help somebody be better from the experience that I've had and the value that I can bring, even if it's just a conversation that comes in passing? How do I not just say I'm going to clock in, clock out at work and then go home and pay my bills? Like, that's not the life. Like, if you want this abundant life, it means that you got to be willing to serve. If you want this abundant life, it means you got to be willing to go after something bigger than yourself. And that's where Christ comes into play, because again, he came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life. And that's what makes Jesus different than anything else out here. That's what makes him so powerful, because he was willing to die, and then he rose and he had all power in his hand 3 days later, and he's coming back. And I'm here to tell you, like, when you think about the gift of Christ and salvation being free, but again, it's a gift. And that's what we got to get to the point in our life. We got to get to a point in our life where we're being a blessing to somebody. How do we go into environments and rooms and add value? How do we make an environment or a situation better than it was when we got it, even though somebody didn't treat us the right way? How do we turn the other cheek and live a life that's a life of service, a life of love, and not focusing on being a good person? It's about, what is he saying for me to go do, and how do I be obedient to his will and make true impact happen? That's the last thing I would say to the listeners.
Beautiful.
All right. Well, look, I'm excited. I'm encouraged. This was powerful. Dr. Daniels, I appreciate you joining, man. I know
Absolutely.
You're known as Joe. I know you as Joey, but I really appreciate this time, man. I think somebody needs to hear this. For those that's listening, just last few things for me is this. One, we got one last episode left in season 1. It is crazy to think we're about to be 10 episodes into season 1, but season 1, episode 10 is going to be the last episode of season 1. I really encourage you all to join us. Again, these last few episodes, we've been talking about the Why Not Me series. So I just encourage you to challenge yourself. Like, even from this conversation today, like, don't be so focused on what you don't have and what you don't know. Focus on, why not me? Why can't I be the one to go out there and make this change? Why can't I be the one to go out there and move the needle for that X, Y, and Z, whatever that thing looks like? Why not you? And the last thing that I'll say to the listeners is this. Something that we've been saying for like the last few episodes is, how do we find ways to take time, and rather than waiting to take action, let's take action in that moment right there. How can you empower somebody else right here, right now, in this moment? A lot of times we go through this life and we wander and we feel we're alone, and that's not the way we're intended to live this life. We're intended to have that community. We're intended to have those relationships. And I love what we were talking about here tonight with Dr. Daniels. So with that, Joey, that's all I got, man. I really appreciate the time.
Bless you, man. Thanks for allowing me to be on your series, man, and to be continued. And for all those listening, continue to check in and reach out. I'm sure Reggie would love to have you on, but also love to speak with you and be a big brother to you too. So peace and love, and thanks again.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. Empower Now.